Welcome to the Alpha and Omega from the Flood to the Future podcast, segment 13 Daniel's 70 Weeks.
So, imagine a financial audit that is just so relentless, and unforgiving, that it literally spans centuries.
Right, like tracking every single missed payment across multiple generations.
Exactly. And now, imagine holding a crumbling legal permit signed by a Persian king way back in 445 BC that essentially serves as the starting gun for this insane 173,880-day countdown to clear that ledger.
It is wild, and a countdown that culminates in a very specific, literally scheduled execution.
Yeah, it sounds like the premise for like a high-stakes historical thriller or something.
It really does, but the materials we are looking at today present this not as fiction at all, but as hard mathematical dates. It's structured as this rigid, encrypted chronological ledger.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking, you, our curious listener, into what has to be one of the most intricate mathematical and chronological puzzles in all of ancient literature.
We are talking about the prophecy of Daniel's 70 weeks.
All right, found in the book of Daniel, chapter 9. And our stack of sources today is fascinating. It includes a really meticulous audio analysis of this cosmic countdown, alongside a highly structured document that maps out the resulting eschatological timeline.
And just to define that term for you right up front, eschatological basically refers to the theological study of the end of the world, or the ultimate destiny of humanity.
Yeah. It's heavy stuff. And it's a timeline that forces you to completely shift your expectations of how ancient literature actually operates.
Exactly, because it demands that we view it through a lens of precise mathematics, rather than just, vague mysticism.
Now, before we look at the math, you should know that the documents in our stack today are highly, highly debated.
Oh, absolutely.
We are talking about centuries of intense theological and geopolitical arguments from every side of the political and religious spectrum. So we need to be really clear here. We are not here to endorse any specific religious worldview or take sides in those historical debates.
No, not at all. Our goal today is purely analytical.
Right. We're just putting on our auditor hats and decoding the mechanics, the historiography, and the math exactly as it is presented in the original source documents.
Operating strictly according to their internal logic. Because to understand any countdown of this magnitude, you first need to establish what exactly is being counted.
Yeah, you have to find the starting line.
Right. You have to locate the mechanism that triggered the clock in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the whole premise is based on a massive, accumulating cosmic debt.
A debt of time, specifically.
Right. So the narrative sets the stage by detailing how the prophet Daniel discovers his people, the Israelites, have been consistently disobedient regarding this very specific agricultural law.
Yeah, the historical data points to the ancient concept of the Shemitah, or the Sabbath year.
And this is fascinating. What exactly was the rule there?
So, ancient agrarian law commanded that every 7th year, the Israelites were supposed to let their agricultural land lie completely fallow.
Meaning no farming at all.
Exactly. No planting, no harvesting, complete rest for the soil. And if you think about the economic terror of an entire society just stopping their food production for a whole year.
Just a trusted design mandate.
Right. You can understand the immense pressure to just ignore it.
And according to the historical records detailed in the text, ignore it they did. I mean, for centuries, they worked the land to maximize their economic output, entirely bypassing that mandated year of rest.
They effectively stole time from the land.
Which is such a crazy concept, stealing time. So a cosmic debt was calculated based on that exact violation. The decree hands down a penalty of 70 weeks.
But we have to clarify something there, because in English, the word weeks instantly makes us think of a 7-day period.
Right, Monday through Sunday.
Yeah, but the original Hebrew word used in the text actually refers to heptads.
Heptads.
Right, which is simply a cluster or unit of 7 years. So taking those 70 units and multiplying them by 7 years?
That gives us a total penalty of 490 years.
Exactly.
It's an uncompromising financial audit. Like the ultimate cosmic ledger. They stole 490 years of rest from the land, so they owe 490 years of time to clear the negative balance.
But an ethereal 490-year countdown just hanging in the air is completely useless without a definitive starting line.
Yeah, you need a trigger.
And the text provides a hyper-specific trigger. It says the clock starts at, quote, the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem.
And our analysis ties that trigger directly to a bureaucratic event recorded in the book of Nehemiah.
Right. So Nehemiah was a Jewish exile acting as the cupbearer to the Persian king Artaxerxes.
The guy tasting the wine for poison.
Exactly. And the text notes that Nehemiah is visibly depressed in the king's presence because he has received word that Jerusalem is still in absolute ruins.
Which, by the way, looking depressed or unsatisfied while serving an ancient absolute monarch was an incredibly risky career move.
Oh, yeah. People lost their heads for ruining the king's vibe.
Literally. But instead of executing him, King Artaxerxes issues a royal decree. He gives Nehemiah the funding, the timber, and the safe conduct passports to go rebuild the city.
And the documents we're analyzing use archaeological dating of Persian royal reigns to pinpoint the exact date this specific permit was signed.
Which was March 14th, 445 BC.
Right. But a historian examining this claim would naturally point out that there were actually several decrees issued by Persian kings regarding the Jewish exiles.
Yeah, King Cyrus, for example, issued a really famous decree long before Artaxerxes did.
So why lock onto this specific permit from 445 BC?
Yeah, that was my immediate thought, too. Doesn't it feel a bit like someone just sifting through ancient paperwork to pick the decree that makes their subsequent math work out?
What's fascinating here is that the text actually does not allow for that kind of historical cherry picking.
Oh, really?
No, you have to look at the precise, restrictive wording of Daniel's prophecy. It specifically mandates the rebuilding of the city's street and its wall. And it also adds this gritty condition that the construction will happen in troublesome times.
Right.
The much earlier decree by King Cyrus only authorized the rebuilding of the religious sanctuary, the temple itself.
It didn't mention the walls.
Exactly. Nehemiah's decree is the only historical mandate on record that explicitly authorizes the physical military fortification of the city walls.
And the historical record of Nehemiah's reconstruction perfectly matches those troublesome times criteria as well. I mean, the local geopolitical opposition to Jerusalem having a defensive wall was so fierce that the builders literally had to work with a construction trowel in one hand.
And a weapon in the other.
Yeah, sword. They were under constant threat of assassination and siege. It was an absolute logistical nightmare of a construction project.
It grounds a very lofty, ethereal prophecy in mud, stone, and physical reality.
It really does. So we have our starting line, March 14th, 445 BC, and we have our total cosmic debt, 490 years.
Yeah.
But if you actually try to track those 490 years forward through history, you instantly hit a wall.
A massive chronological wall.
Yeah, the math completely fractures if you attempt to force our modern timekeeping onto the text.
So the timeline breaks those 490 years down into distinct segments. The first segment is 7 weeks or 49 years, which perfectly aligns with that difficult, violent rebuilding phase of the streets and walls.
Okay.
And then the second segment is 62 weeks, or 434 years.
So added together, that gives us an unbroken block of 483 years.
Right, from the Persian starting gun until the arrival of a figure the text calls Messiah the Prince.
But to make those 483 years land accurately on any meaningful historical event, the documentation insists we have to utilize a 360-day prophetic calendar.
Which is where people usually get stuck.
Yeah, I have to push back on this. Because using a 360-day calendar feels dangerously close to a parlor trick.
I get that.
I mean, it functions like a convenient time exchange rate. If I owe you a massive debt in US dollars, but I suddenly decide to pay you back in ancient Roman denarii, the math gets severely massaged. Are we just reverse engineering a calendar to hit a desired historical date?
That skepticism is entirely valid, and it is honestly the first hurdle any modern reader faces. But we have to evaluate the internal logic of ancient timekeeping.
Okay, walk me through it.
Ancient civil calendars were largely lunar, right? Based on the cycles of the moon, making a standard year roughly 354 days long.
Which obviously gets out of sync with the seasons pretty fast.
Exactly. To keep their calendar aligned with the actual solar year so they knew when to plant crops, ancient societies used complex systems of intercalary months.
Think intercalary.
Yeah, they essentially threw in a massive leap month every few years just to catch up to the sun.
So they were constantly dealing with messy fractions of solar days.
It was chaotic, but in prophetic and apocalyptic literature stretching from ancient Mesopotamia straight through to the texts of Genesis and Revelation, there exists an idealized celestial standard.
A perfect year.
Right. They default to exactly 360 days. They viewed the 360 degrees of a perfect mathematical circle as the ultimate representation of divine order, completely free from the chaotic fractions of human timekeeping. Yeah, and Sir Isaac Newton actually obsessed over this very calculation. He applied the exact same rigorous analytical framework to the Book of Daniel as he did to the laws of physics.
Recognizing that these ancient texts operate on a distinct, unbroken internal logic.
Precisely.
Okay, so if you were trying to do this math in your head right now while commuting or, making coffee, don't worry, we'll break down exactly how they get to the final number.
Please do.
If we play by the text's internal rules, we take that block of 483 years and multiply it by a 360-day ancient year. That gives us exactly 173,880 days.
A huge number.
Massive. And when you count 173,880 days forward from our starting line on March 14, 445 BC, and you factor in the modern leap years and the complicated conversion between Julian and Gregorian dates, the analysis claims you land perfectly on April 6, 32 AD.
And April 6, 32 AD is not just some arbitrary date in the historical narrative.
Not at all. That date aligns with Palm Sunday. It is the exact day Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, publicly presenting himself as the fulfillment of messianic prophecies.
It supposedly fulfills Zechariah 9.9, predicting a king arriving on a donkey.
Right. And Psalm 118, with the crowd shouting, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord."
The precision of it, stretching from a Persian bureaucrat's pen across centuries to land on a specific Sunday, it forces a serious reckoning with the text.
It's staggering.
But the math landing perfectly on that Sunday immediately precedes a sharp, violent turn in the narrative that seemingly shatters the entire timeline.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Right after the arrival of this Messiah the Prince, the text says he is cut off.
And the original Hebrew word used there is karet.
Karet. What does that mean in a legal sense?
It is a very specific, severe legal term. It implies an execution for a capital offense. It's a sudden, violent, permanent removal from society.
But the prophecy attaches a massive legal loophole to this execution. It says he is cut off, quote, but not for himself.
Not for himself.
Right. Think of it like a hostile corporate takeover, where an innocent proxy assumes all your catastrophic liabilities. The 483-year cosmic debt is finally called in, but the guarantor pays it with his life to clear the red ink for someone else.
The legal terminology perfectly supports that proxy interpretation, and immediately following this substitutionary execution, the text predicts absolute sweeping devastation.
It gets dark fast.
It states that the people of the prince who is to come will sweep into Jerusalem like a flood of armies.
A flood of armies. And our materials link this directly to the Roman Empire in 70 AD.
Which was brutal.
It wasn't just a battle. The Roman legion systematically dismantled the temple, literally stone by stone, burned the records, and left the entire civilization in absolute ruins.
But mathematically, this Roman flood leaves us with a massive structural anomaly.
Right, because the 490-year countdown ran continuously for 483 years.
Yeah.
The execution happens, the substitution is made, the city is leveled. But what about the remaining 7 years? The math is incomplete. The final week of the 70 weeks is just, it's missing.
It's suspended.
Yeah, it's like a frozen bank account.
Theologians often refer to the suspended period as a gap, or the church age. The final 7-year segment is entirely deferred to the future.
So it's just hanging there.
Exactly. And our secondary source breaks down the structure of this highly anticipated 70th week. It is split into 2 distinct halves, each lasting exactly 3.5 years.
Which is 12,260 days.
Correct.
Wait, so with the timeline completely frozen, what actually triggers this final dangling clock to start ticking again?
Well, the first half begins when a future figure, often identified in these texts as the Antichrist, confirms a firm covenant, or like a sweeping peace treaty, with the many, which includes Israel.
Okay.
But at the exact midpoint of those 7 years, that covenant is violently broken. This leader puts an abrupt end to the sacrificial system in a newly rebuilt temple.
And what is the fallout of him breaking that treaty?
That event is known as the Abomination of Desolation. Yeah, it acts as the pivot point, kicking off the final 3.5 years. This concluding period is characterized by unprecedented global distress, literal earth-shaking events, and societal collapse.
Frequently equated with the Great Tribulation.
Yes. And by the end of this total 490-year timeline, the text lays out a 6-fold purpose that must be entirely completed to close the ledger once and for all.
Let's actually look at those 6 goals because they represent a massive shift in how the debt is handled. The text says the timeline must first finish transgression, second, make an end of sins, and third, reconcile iniquity.
So those first 3 are all about clearing the negative debt.
Exactly. But then it pivots to depositing positive capital, bringing in everlasting righteousness, sealing up vision and prophecy, and finally, anointing the most holy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the suspension of the final week serves a brilliant psychological and eschatological function.
How so?
Well, up until the 483rd year, the text operates in the verifiable, dusty past tense of fulfilled history, right? But that pause creates a state of perpetual anticipation for the reader. The substitutionary death may have addressed the spiritual debt, but the chronological timer remains incomplete.
It's still ticking or waiting to tick.
Exactly. It transitions the text from a fixed historical ledger into an open-ended perpetual warning that demands the reader's constant vigilance.
A suspended cosmic debt dangling over human history like a sword. It is incredibly compelling. But because this timeline asserts such hyper-specific tracking, bridging ancient Persia to 32 AD and then leaving a terrifying 7-year threat hanging over humanity, it sounds almost too incredible to be true.
Naturally.
Which is exactly why it has provoked intense historical skepticism.
Without a doubt. The materials directly address the German school of higher criticism, which emerged in the 19th century as this really rationalist approach to biblical texts.
Okay.
They treated these documents purely as human literary products, completely devoid of any predictive capability.
Right. They looked at the sheer decimal-level exactness of Daniel's prophecy and argued it was just mathematically impossible to predict. Therefore, they claimed it had to be falsified and backdated.
Right.
They said it was written centuries later, after the events of 32 AD had already taken place, just to make it look like a miraculous prediction.
Which, honestly, is the standard, logical, historical defense.
Yeah. If someone hands you a document dated 1910 that perfectly predicts the geopolitical movements of World War II, you don't assume they're psychic.
No, you assume the date on the paper is forged.
Exactly.
But the source highlights a piece of physical counter-evidence that it claims dismantled this skeptical theory entirely.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah, the scrolls pulled from the Qumran caves contain nearly complete copies of the Book of Daniel. And the crucial element wasn't just finding them, it was how archaeologists dated them.
Using radiometric carbon dating.
Which tests the actual physical decay of isotopes in the parchment to put a hard, undeniable scientific lock on the manuscript's age. And alongside paleographic analysis of the handwriting, they definitively proved these manuscripts were written long before the Roman destruction of the temple.
And well before the events of 32 AD.
Yeah.
The physical scientific data mathematically predates the historical fulfillments. It completely removes the possibility of retroactive forgery.
Right. But then the analysis brings up a second, quote-unquote, mic drop argument that shifts away from ancient parchment and gets a lot more controversial.
Oh, yes.
It points to the founding of the modern state of Israel on May 14th, 1948, claiming it fulfilled a separate prophecy in Isaiah 66.8.
Right.
So what does this all mean? How are you, the listener, supposed to evaluate a document that uses a mid-20th century geopolitical event to settle an ancient math debate?
This raises an important question about the tension between historical skepticism and living theology. The source highlights 1948 to argue that the prophetic clock and its underlying focus on the Jewish people and the physical geography of Jerusalem is still an active ticking mechanism.
Yeah.
And you don't have to accept the theological interpretation to recognize the profound sociological impact here. Millions of people view this ancient math not as a relic of the past, but as an active, breathing framework for interpreting current geopolitical realities.
It is wild to step back and look at the sheer scope of the journey we just went on. Let's recap. We started with ancient agricultural Sabbath laws and a society refusing to let their dirt rest.
Which triggered a 490-year cosmic penalty.
Right. Then we traced a historical starting gun to a Persian royal permit issued to a depressed cupbearer in 445 BC.
And then we had to apply the internal logic of an ancient 360-day calendar to track exactly 173,880 days of celestial math.
Which landed perfectly on a substitutionary execution, a guarantor paying the debt,
Yeah.
followed by the Roman legions systematically erasing Jerusalem.
And it all culminates in a dangling, frozen 7-year bank account of time that continues to impact modern geopolitics today.
Diving into sources like these proves that ancient texts are not just rudimentary fables or, simple morality tales. They are highly complex, interlocking puzzles that fiercely challenge our modern biases.
They demand that we analyze them on their own terms, using their own internal mechanics.
Which leaves you with a deeply unsettling final thought to mull over. The entire integrity of this 173,880-day countdown relies on one crucial thing.
The 360-day calendar model.
Exactly. If you arrogantly force a modern 365-day Gregorian calendar onto the text, the math entirely collapses. It falls apart completely.
Completely.
It makes you wonder how many other ancient texts, historical records, or great mysteries are we currently completely misunderstanding simply because we are forcing our modern frameworks onto ancient minds.
Thank you for joining us on the Alpha and Omega podcast.